Hey everybody, I wanted to share with you some of my thoughts, and I want to ask you what you think about Proverbs 16 through 19. You know, some days I'll do these videos. I'm doing this Bible in 1 year plan. If you want to look at it on YouVersion, that's what it looks like. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? And we do this every year, every day, but we started the day we got married, and we've done this every day. So it's pretty cool. Seek ye first his ways of doing things right. Anyway, so I'm going to share with you what I find interesting in these passages. And there for a long time, I was doing, when I first got saved, I was reading 4 old, 4 new, 1 Psalm, and 1 Proverb a day. And Proverbs, what I find interesting about it is, I think we talked in the last video, is wisdom is a spirit, right, that comes from God. And when we look at Solomon's life, we see that he doesn't really talk to God that much. I mean, he asked God for wisdom in the dream, and it's almost like Abraham. He doesn't have the same spiritual relationship that David, his father, did, right? And you'll find that Solomon, being as wise as he was, and is that he's really caught up in wisdom. And I'm thinking about this spiritual disconnect because we see that in Ecclesiastes. He sees that vanity, vanity, all is vanity. So it's really interesting to see the contrast of Proverbs versus Ecclesiastes. Pretty interesting. Now, in Proverbs 16:1, I want to show you something interesting, okay? The preparations of the heart in man, and the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. Well, this is one of the cool things about eSword is you can see all these are different Bibles. And I'm like, what does that mean? You know, and we have the commentaries and all that stuff. But in a complete Jewish Bible, this is very interesting. A person is responsible to prepare his heart, but how the tongue speaks is from Adonai. So I suggest getting eSword. It's free. I mean, it's donation only, right? And I love this software because, you know, different versions are almost like a commentary, right? And you can look at the original Hebrew, right? The arrangement, heart. You can see the Hebrew in Strong's and the Thayers and all that. Anyway, so what I find interesting here is throughout the whole Bible, God is concerned with the heart of man. It's as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Here's another thing. All the way, I could probably talk all day on, dude. I'm gonna just try to go with the stuff that I find striking. All the ways of man are clean in his own eyes, but the Lord weigheth the spirits. How about when, Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven and kill that evangelist? It's like, you don't know what spirit you are of. That was Jesus weighing the spirits. We as saved people, covenant people, have to discern spirits. The Bible talks about us discerning spirits, and the Lord shows us, hey, you don't know what spirit you're of. Commit your works unto the Lord, 16:3. I'm not going to do them all. It looks like I am, but there's just so much to do, you know. Commit your works unto the Lord. And I think this is kind of like in the movie The Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, you know. He was basically teaching that kid something. I know it's not a Christian film, but I think of Jesus being a carpenter or a stone worker. I'm thinking of the time that when we work on things, that the Spirit of the Lord quickens revelation to us. I don't know if you've ever caught that, but when you just start doing your work, God establishes your thoughts. It happens with me in the shower. I know that's not working, but you know what I'm talking about? Have you ever had a shower revelation? And it's kind of like that when you're working, when you're doing stuff. 16:4, the Lord hath made all things for himself, even the wicked, home biscuit, even the wicked. So we're talking about the wheats and the tares. They're in the same field as the husbandman. The sheep and the goats, they have the same shepherd, but they're goats, right? And this is one of the reasons that Jesus did not try to convince people to get saved. You ever notice that? He didn't spend a long time saying, oh, no, you need to believe in me. No, he just put it out there. He threw out the dragnet, and then if they got in the net, he'd throw out the bad ones. So apparently, I'm saying that, there's the seed of the woman and the seed of the devil. Okay, that's talked about in Genesis chapter 3, I believe. I will put enmity between thy seed and the seed of the woman. All right, so he's saying there's going to be seed of the wicked. By iniquity and truth, by mercy and truth, iniquity is purged. This is interesting because in the Old Testament, if you remember, Daniel said something to Nebuchadnezzar that's very interesting. He says, wherefore, O king, let thy counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. So in the Old Testament, one of the things that they would do is show mercy, and it went good towards your account with God. Pretty interesting. That's Daniel 4:27. A man's heart deviseth his way. Let's see if I don't need to talk about all of them. Let's go down here to, let's just go down here to the bottom. Let's see. I find it interesting. 33 I wanted to talk about. 32 first. He that is slow to anger. This is very important. You need to rule over yourself, right? This is overcoming. And whenever we have that response, there's an ignosecond, there's a small segment right there when something happens that we can choose our response. And we need to learn how to find peace, follow peace with all men, right? The lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is the Lord. I want to tell you what, they had Urim and Thummim in the Old Testament, and this is what the priest would use to talk to God, right? I think it was a stone that would light up. He had the 12 stones on the breastplate that would light up. My memory's a little off right here, but he had Urim and Thummim, and that's why when the psalmist prayed, or whenever you look in the books of Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles, whenever they would ask God, should we do this? There's always a yes or no question. So they would do these yes or no's until they finally got the answer. Now, also, if you look in the book of Jonah, okay, pagans even cast lots in the book of Jonah on who to throw in the water, right? And they knew it was of God. In the New Testament, though, I think we're supposed to seek the Spirit of the Lord directly. The reason I say that, if you'll remember, Peter was quick to cast lots for Matthias, but we really don't see Matthias doing anything, right? In the New Testament, he didn't write any of the books. I mean, you don't really hear much about Matthias, but you do hear a lot about Paul. Now, I'm not dogmatic about this, but I think they were trying to rush that replacement for Judas, and I don't know. So I'd like to know, do you discern the will of the Lord now by casting lots? To me, it sounds almost like divination in the New Testament, right? But yeah, I'm just putting that out there. Let's go to 17. Let's see what I find interesting in chapter 17. Oh, here's one in 3 right here. The finding pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord trieth the hearts. In 1 Peter 1:7, it says, the trial of your faith being much more precious than gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found into praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. When we go, we don't know who we are until we go through the fire. I mean, just like Peter says, I'm going to be with you, Lord. I'll be with you. And then Peter falls away. Well, this devil asked Jesus permission to sift Peter as wheat, and Jesus didn't say, hey, I rebuke the devil for you, Peter. No, man, he let him go through the trial. And Jesus even prophesies that Peter will come back, right? So, but the Lord tries the hearts, and that's why we go through things. Let's see. Let's go to 22, I guess. I'm just talking about things I find interesting. Now, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. If you ever notice that whatever your attitude is, it's going to have an effect on you. I know some people like at the food pantry, there's these ladies are constantly smiling, they're constantly happy, and I'm like, and when I consider them, the Lord's like, they're onto something. They're onto something. And whenever you're happy, you choose. Like in anger, we were just talking about anger a second ago. You can choose your response. And one of the things that I do to change my mind is Psalm 100.4. We enter his gates with thanksgiving, we enter his courts with praise. I start thanking the Lord for things. Like, for instance, if things are terrible and I have this terrible mindset, I change my mind. I'm transformed by the renewing of my mind. I change my mind. I'm like, Lord, I thank you for my cats. I thank you for my health. I thank you. I have a house. I think I have air conditioning. I'm starting to think. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, look at the things that God has blessed me with. And that crescendos into praise. And then all of a sudden I'm in the spirit, right? And here's this spirit here, but a broken spirit. So when you become thankful, you start crescendoing in the spirit, and all of a sudden you're in the presence of God. We enter his gates with thanksgiving, his courts with praise, right? And God's a spirit. Those who worship him must do so in spirit and truth. But if we don't do that, if we have a broken spirit, it can make us sick. And yeah. A wicked man taketh the gift out of the bosom and perverts the ways of judgment. Bribes. Don't need to talk too much about that. Here's another thing in, 1727. He that hath knowledge spareth his words, and a man of understanding is of an excellent spirit. Don't talk too much, man. You know what? It's one of the policies, you just blow their minds. Don't tell people your plans. Just be slow to speak, right? Be a doer, not a talker. The psalmist talks a lot about talking leads to nothing. You need to be a doer and spare your words. Just, solve the problem. Don't talk about it all day. Let's go on to the next one here. I'm just talking about some of the things I find striking today. Let's go to 18:8, I guess. Here's something interesting. The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. When I was a kid, we had this proverb, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words don't do a thing. Well, that's not true. The Bible says that words are wounds that go into the innermost parts of a belly. So if you're going to gossip, if you're going to say something that doesn't need to be said, look at Jesus' life. How often did he talk? He said, basically, if you read the scriptures, like he only talked when God told him to say something. If you look at the angels, when did they talk? They only said what they were supposed to say. Have you ever analyzed that? Like, let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We only say what God tells us to say. Pretty interesting. And I don't think God's going to want us to gossip, because when we bear tales, when we tell stories, there's wounds, and they go down to the innermost parts of the belly. Something I find interesting there. Here's one in verse 13. He that answereth the matter before he hears it is folly and shame unto him. I could talk about this quite a bit, but the thing is, this is contempt prior to investigation, right? When you are... you're not willing to hear, like, oh man, we see this like Republicans and Democrats, liberals, and conservatives, Do you ever notice that they never have a dialogue? They refuse to hear a matter. Abortion's a really good one. And people like the conservatives say, oh, well, they're killing babies, right? So I'm not going to listen to anything they have to say. Well, the other side has a good argument. What are you going to do about the baby, right? And so you're going to have to, you can't just say, well, don't kill your baby. And this is why this has birthed some really good ministries. Sidewalk Advocates for Life. They go outside of abortion clinics because they have listened to the argument of the pro-choice people that want to kill babies, which is bad. But they also provide resources for them to carry their baby to term and adopt the child, because there's no way they can do it on their own. So this comes from having a dialogue. You need to, even if you disagree with someone, you need to have a dialogue. And in the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, Stephen Covey said, seek ye first to understand and then to be understood. And he talked about this, having a fruitful dialogue. Okay, it's very, very interesting. He would say, seek first to understand. In other words, don't just try to get your point across. Hear what the other person's saying. And he would say, okay, I want you to let me see if I understand your point. I want to rephrase it, not parrot it, not just say the same words. rephrase it to show the other person that you understand. And then and only then, when they say, yeah, you understand my point, then you ask them to give you the same grace for your point, right? This is a fruitful conversation. This is where problems get solved. So you need to be, engaged in hearing what the other person has to say, or you're just going to be separated and there's not going to be any solutions. So like I said, Sidewalk Advocates for Life, people preaching outside of abortion clinics, provide a way for the mother coming to the abortion clinic to give up their baby for adoption, and it's all paid for and they take care of it. I mean, there are solutions. All right. That's from a dialogue. Let's try 16. A man's gift maketh room for him and bringeth him before great men. One of the things about this is that if you are excelling in a gift, right, people will notice it and they will ask you to work with them. That's just how that is. Let's see. I think 24 is something we need to talk about. A man that hath friends must show himself friendly. I want to talk a second about the law of reciprocity. Okay. Now, one of the things that I do as an evangelist is we try to establish rapport. Okay. So when the Spirit of the Lord highlights somebody for me to talk to, I'm going to say, hey, nice shoes. Or, I saw that concert. Like I went to the Rolling Stones concert. Like I was talking to somebody yesterday. You find a me too thing. Rapport is we're like each other, Oh yeah, I went to, now I'm no longer a Rolling Stones concert goer, but I did go when I was lost. And what happens is I was showing myself friendly. And the law of reciprocity is when you pay someone a compliment, when you do something for them, they want to reciprocate. And that is a basis of a friendship, right? Pretty interesting, isn't it? So if you want friends, you can't just close yourself off to people. I know a lot of people go, why don't I have any friends? It's because you're being a jerk. It's because you're being a jerk, man. Don't be a jerk. Go out of your way to help your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. Your neighbor doesn't have air conditioning or something, help them out. Love them as yourself. If you have air conditioning, if you have a roof over your head, that type of thing, you want to help them out. Proverbs 19. Let's see what I find interesting about that. Oh, here's a good one. 19:2. Also, the soul be without knowledge, it is not good, and he that hasteth with his feet sinneth. You got to think things through, man. Look diligently into your flocks. You need to think things through. Count the cost before you do stuff. Don't just run off and do things, right? When you run off and do things, it costs you thousands of dollars in the long run. You need to pray about it, seek God about it. And if you go quickly with your feet, it's going to bite you. You're not listening to God. Okay, I think down here at 17, I got a lot to say. Okay, he that hath pitieth upon the poor lendeth to the Lord, and that which he hath given he will pay him again. I'm going to tell you what, man. I have seen this come to pass. In Matthew 6:33, he says, seek ye first the kingdom and his ways of doing things right, and these things shall be added unto you. When you help out the poor people, God has a way of making it up to you. He does, and it feels good. You have a sense of fulfillment. Chasten thy son while there's still hope. Dude, now, I'm going to tell you what. This is very important. If you don't spank your kid for the right reason, not just to beat them. I think there's a do not provoke your child to wrath type thing. They need to understand that this is when you do this spanking happens, so it saves your soul from hell. I wonder if there's another one here. Yeah, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. You will drive. That's Proverbs 22:15. You will drive it from him. That's pretty interesting. 13:24. He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. So I'm going to tell you what. when you're young, I'm not saying, I don't know the age, okay? I'm not a daddy, but I do know I'm 60 and I've seen this happen. If you do not spank your kid, they're going to turn out to be a spoiled, rotten person. And I'm going to tell you what, there's a lot of people that say, yeah, thank God that my daddy spanked me because I would have been a very bad person. And don't spare for them crying. Okay. I know a lot of people disagree with this, but this is the Bible, man. This is the Bible. All right. Well, I'll read that one. It says, God spanks us today, too. God spanks us today. I'm going to read this one. Proverbs 29:17. Correct thy son, and he shall give thee rest. Yea, he shall give delight unto thy soul. Pretty interesting. You got to do it while there's still hope. You got to do it while there's still hope. In other words, this means there's no hope at a certain point. I just want you to catch that. A man of great wrath shall suffer punishment, if thou deliver him, you must do it again. So here's the deal, and I talked about this other day on the other broadcast. Don't be friends with people that get angry quickly, because you are taking fire into your lap. I know this is personal wisdom of mine. I see people that get angry in a hurry, and you being around them and being their friend, you always suffer for it, and it just turns out not to be good. So they don't have control over their soul, like we were talking earlier. They're not greater than men that taketh the big city. You got to be able to slow to wrath. Okay. Let's see. Is there anything else I want to talk about? Here's one, 24. 24. A slothful man hideth his hand in his bosom, will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. You ever have somebody, they'll have their phone in their hand, they'll say, hey, what's the weather today? I'm like, dude, the phone's in your hand, my phone's in the other room. Why don't you just ask? I'm like, yeah. So do something yourself, and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. This is kind of funny because if you observe, there are people that they won't help themselves. They won't help themselves. And I think there's a spirit there. When you obviously see the solution, but they don't, I'm not really sure why that is, but I've noticed people do that. So let's see. Yeah, here's one. Let's see what this says in the Complete Jewish Bible, 1927. My son, if you stop heeding discipline, you will stray from the principles of knowledge. So here it says, cease, my son, to hear the instruction that causes the error from the words of knowledge. We need to read the Bible. The Bible is the easiest book on earth to get right now. Somebody will give you a free one. You know what I'm saying? So get true instruction, the words of knowledge, words of God, Jesus, what Jesus says. Anyway, I just wanted to share this with you. Actually, I want to know, what do you find interesting about these chapters? What do you find, let me know in the comments. And if this has touched you, please share this with other people, because I'd like this to have a discussion. God bless you. Thank you for being in my life. Until we meet again, dig deeper and go higher.